Get ready for part 2 of episode 2 of your new favorite talk show.
I was about to go off on my Killer Mike rant. And I was saying, so Eli and I have been talking for the past hour about direct and indirect action surrounding the protests that are going on, how one can be an ally to the conversations that are happening right now. And so before we got cut off, I was about to talk about being a critical consumer and a critical ally and what that means. And so we were talking about Killer Mike and his speech that he made with the Atlanta Police Department and Miss Keisha Lance Bottoms, and it was all these black faces in a space saying things that are in a lot of ways really harmful and are in a lot of ways pushing a respectability politics model that are dangerous to lower income, lower economic status black people. And so when I'm saying being a critical consumer, it's wonderful that somebody who is a celebrity who has a platform is using their voice, but how are they choosing to use it? So as much as, what is this saying? Oh, okay, we can go back to that. So somebody just asked me, what did we think about Blackout Tuesday? If you go to my IGTV page, you can see that discussion that we had. So we had a super lengthy conversation about that, but short version, long version short. It's performative. There's better things to be doing with your time, but go check out that if you want the in-depth conversation.
Feel free to message me if you want a short summary. And I also am in everyone I'm messaging today. I'm spending time. I'll talk about ways to do everyone I'm messaging today. I am including resources on what you should do instead, because deleting your post is not enough, right? Like deleting that post and just be like, oops, sorry. Like I'll talk a little bit about how to react when you get called out, because like that's an important thing to learn as like an ally and accomplice, is like what to do when you get called out on stuff, and saying I'm sorry is like not it.
Right.
Like unless like that's
yeah. But the idea of every celebrity, specifically every black celebrity, does not represent the entire black experience, nor do they represent the black experience of the current black American. So like in the cases of Killer Mikes and TIs, they've been successful and wealthy longer at this point than they have been on the other side of that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And so when Killer Mike is out here, you know, I have cops in my family and there are good cops, and, you know, we need to just love on the cops. Like, sure, I'm a Christian, so I'm gonna go ahead and be like, yes, we need to love everybody. But the fact of the conversation is black people are being killed by the police. And so that's the conversation. So when I'm seeing people who are, and I understand, right? Like there are people out here who are attempting to be good allies. They're going to, if I'm always telling people, go find the voices that are already speaking on this, go use the internet, then you're doing that. But I need you to take that a step further and be a critical consumer and listen to what's being said. If you are overwhelmingly seeing the black people in your life saying they don't support the police for this many reasons, and then you see a Killer Mike or a TI or that fool Shamik Moore saying, you know, things that are counterproductive to that, I would listen to the black people that are actually in your life, because they have a lived experience that's a little different than them. And it's not to say that black people with money and black celebrities are not saying good things. I want to amplify the voices that are, like actor Rome Flynn from How to Get Away with Murder. There was literally somebody who I just saw, Karuchi Tran has been saying a lot of very helpful and useful things. Cardi B has been saying a lot of helpful and useful things. Like, it's not that they cannot be productive voices,
like,
but
Ice-T has spent like 15 years playing a cop on TV, and he's calling out the company that makes Law and Order. Like, they can do good stuff, and we're not saying like don't trust any celebrity or don't trust any politician. What I'm saying is that like those politicians are not, you can't cite them when somebody calls you out on something. Right. You can't be like, you also can't, like, if I'm giving you a bunch of resources and I'm saying like, hey, like the black protesters have asked us to like stop to delete our black, you know, blackout day posts, and like you say like, but my black friend said it was okay, like it's not cool. Like that's not cool, and that's not like thinking critically, and like that's not getting educated, and like that's another important reason why it's so important to spend time if you can't go out and protest, actually understanding the like the workings of Black liberation, so you can think critically, because you can't be expected to actually judge what information is good and what like tactics are like are aiding in general if you don't have that education.
Right.
And so like that's another reason why that education is so important. Like, and not just educating yourself, but like actively educating other people around you, like other
Yes.
white people. Like what I said about like spending this time radicalizing, if you can't go out, like spending time radicalizing those people who have even more privilege than you. Like I'm hosting a Netflix watch party, like, you know, to watch the 13th.
I just watched
Which is,
that for the first time with my dad
mm-hmm.
Saturday, Sunday. And it's
Right.
one of those, like, there are literally resources that are already out. Like, me doing this conversation is because this is how I choose to use my voice and my platform.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, this work has been done. There are already these conversations that are being had. There are books, there are movies, there are all these different platforms and ways to get this education in order to become a more critical consumer. In the same way that we were given reading comprehension as a part of the curriculum in K through 12 schooling.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying that with an asterisk. So again, I've also only been to private school, so I know what that looked like for me. I don't know that that was as effective in other places and spaces, but that's something that we do. So in the same way that you are reading a text and going, well, what does this mean? And whose voices are being left out, and asking those critical questions, I need all non-Black folk who are trying to call themselves allies to be critical of all the voices that are put out, because every voice that speaks out that is Black does not speak out for the Black experience as a whole. And no one really does. Everyone speaks out as an individual. Some people are just more in touch with the culture than they aren't. Because I also noticed the same people who are posting Killer Mike's speech are the
Mm-hmm.
same people who had a whole lot to say about Colin Kaepernick and a whole lot of critique and conversation. And I think it's important to highlight this, and even though I have some personal things that I've learned about Colin Kaepernick that make me a little shaky, is
Mm-hmm.
that Colin Kaepernick was doing the right thing, quote unquote, the right thing.
The peaceful protest.
Protesting. He was explaining his platform, and he was doing it peacefully, quietly, and unobtrusively. And we are still here. And his former employer is making these wonderful statements in support of Black Lives Matter. Colin Kaepernick is still unemployed. Eric Reed is still facing, different types of adversity within the league. But y'all are posting statements, which is what we were getting into about performative allyship, is that these statements, there was actually a brand that made a mock one called Brand, and they were like making it very vague intentionally, because that's what a lot of these statements are, very vague. But these statements don't mean anything to me and to a lot of Black people if they're not coupled with action. I actually had an instance with my high school where I noticed they hadn't made a statement, and so I sent them an email explaining why that was problematic as hell and what their statement needed to include in order to be a comprehensive statement. And let me tell you what wasn't in that statement. Half of the stuff I said. Because a comprehensive statement, for it to be effective and for me to believe that you are attempting to better yourself, it needs action items. It needs the acknowledgement of what has actually occurred. It needs to amplify resources, and depending on the institution or person that we're speaking about, needs to include where you are donating and maybe how much you're donating. Because I'm noticing what brands that I engage with regularly that are doing that. I'm noticing where I'm about to change my spending very differently based on who is and who isn't speaking up, because these conversations are super important. They are super necessary, but is it conversation, or is it conversation in action? Right? The first step is always learning. So it's Eli and I having this conversation. If Eli was a different person, was an ignorant person that Eli could never be. But if I was having this conversation with Eli, then this is the first step, right? Like, this is the education, the awareness, the uncovering. And then what Eli does, that's the question. But then what Eli does with that information is up to them as an ally. So Danny with 2eyes.alc asked, do you think posting your donations is performative as well?
It
Eli and I might
can
have
be,
different answers on
but
this.
here's my thing. I'm loving the stuff like
I
tag
feel like
people
it
in
can
donation.
be.
Like tag me,
Right? Like it can
match
be
my donation
depending
like
on
that.
Go ahead. You were cutting out, so I didn't hear you talk.
Yeah,
Go
that's
ahead.
what I think yes, it can be if you're like, I donated $20, like absolve me of my white guilt. But like, what I'm saying is like, if you like, the only chain things I want to see about Black Lives Matter is, hey, I donated like $20 to North Star Health Collective, which provides treatment to Minneapolis protesters. Five people I want you to donate some money to. Like that's not performative.
Yeah, I think it depends on how we're doing it. Like if we're doing the whole, like I had a friend, Black, but I had a friend who was like, hey, I donated X amount of money. Who's willing to match me donating that? I think that's helpful. I think that's useful. But I think that when it's just like, ha, $20 and that's it, and that's all you've done, that's when it becomes performative. I was actually it was a tweet that was funny as a tweet, but I appreciated it, was somebody in Drake's circle DM'd him, was like, oh, I donated $400 to this bail fund. And then Drake comes back and was like, I donated $100,000. Oh, wait, they think my card is fake. Oh, they thought, nah, somebody can't be donating that money. And the tweet was like, Drake heard match me and said, hold my Prosecco. Like, I thought that was hilarious. Like, yes, hold my Prosecco as I donate. But I think that is when it's useful, is when it's about getting people to match you, or when it's like Eli's done this. It's like, it's Eli's birthday month. Eli's like, instead of sending me money, let's donate here. Right? Like, I think that's when it's posting donation is useful. But like Eli was saying, if it's about absolving me of my white guilt, or just being like, I did it, I'm not racist, that's when I have an issue with it. But I think it is, especially depending on what your circles look like, I think it's important to, in some cases, publicize it. If you are a non-racist white person who the majority of their circle is possibly racist, or at least conservative and quiet, I think it's important that you are then publishing, hey, I'm donating to Black Lives Matter because I believe that I'm not racist. And for everyone in my circle who thinks they're not racist and has an issue with this, let's have a conversation about your problem. Like, I think that's when it becomes a useful and necessary, conversation. But I'm not interested in just like, in the same way I'm not interested in these black tiles, I'm not interested in just seeing you donate. Because I think the other problem is donating doesn't change the way you think. Because you have to educate yourself and we were saying it a lot during Not Against You, of like, decolonizing your education is just as important as putting your money somewhere. Because you can donate money all day long, but if you're still going to be the Karen that calls the police because a man tells you to put your dog back on a leash in a public park, you really didn't do anything. You didn't do anything. Because I think that situation irritates me. If you have not seen Amanda Seales, her, I don't want to call it a rant, but like her monologue about that, her discussion of that, make sure you go check that out at Amanda Seales. I love her. She hosted my Miss Black and Gold pageant, so she's my fave. But I would go check that out.
One thing I don't think that's getting enough attention right now is as like mutual aid has been something that has been like in marginalized communities for like years, like mutual aid networks and like taking care of people and all throughout COVID. But it's even more like it's even more important now, I think. Like white people, like if you've donated to a charity and you're like, I don't know where else to donate, like Venmo your black friends who are protesting. Just be like,
on
thank you for your labor.
Though, like Zelly Imani.
I did that this morning, and like that
Zelly Imani, sorry, I took a snack break. But Zelly Imani is an activist who I had the pleasure of meeting during Not Against You and working with and being in conversation with. He, for the last, I want to say over a month, it might be going into month 2.5, if I'm thinking correctly, has been doing mutual aid where he and a group of volunteers have been going out and feeding the elderly folks in Jersey, and like going and making sure that every day that people have meals. It started off with like his grandma and like 10, 20 of her friends, and then it has now grown to like 200 meals a day, I think, or something like that. So if people are wanting other ways to donate and other spaces to donate, it doesn't have to be bail funds. It can be mutual aid programs. It can also be programs that are working on different solutions. Like I know in DC there are different like youth programs that are about like advocacy and giving specifically Black kids different access and exposure to the arts. That's another thing that you can do that is supportive. Like donating, finding other funds that center Black people are other ways that you can be supportive and helpful in this time of COVID and everything else, but just in general of like ways to be supportive of Black voices. Because I think the other thing is if the only time you're giving money to Black people is when they're being murdered, I begin to question if you care about Black people as people outside of that time. Right? Like I think it's important. It's just as important for me to donate to the bail fund in Minnesota as it is for me to support different youth programs, as it is to support after school programs for kids, as it is to work with communities that are working on, like I know in Baltimore, they have like ceasefire programs. Like I think those are also spaces that you can donate to that are super important. And as a white and non-Black person, finding beyond donating, because I think, right, like we also have to acknowledge there's a certain privilege in being able to donate. Like you have to have
especially
money.
during COVID.
Especially during COVID,
right now.
You have to have money that you don't need in order to.
I mean, did you see that somebody put out a YouTube video that's like an hour long and you can just play it on repeat, and the ad money will go directly to Black Lives Matter and the Minnesota Freedom, like all like. I'm sending that to people all day because I'm like, they're like, if you don't have a paycheck right now, like I empathize with you. I highly empathize with you. I think the things you could be doing is get educated, having those tough conversations with your white family members. I have a friend who called his mom's boyfriend out on saying the N-word, and he was kicked out of his house last week. Like, that's the real shit. Like, that's like, I had a 2-hour conversation about race with my mom last night at 2 a.m. Like, because she came in and wanted to talk about my involvement on Saturday, and I was like, let's sit down and talk. And it's important because, like, for me, like, personally, my mom is a nurse practitioner. She has patients. And for me, it's incredibly important to have those conversations with her because, specifically because of the medical trauma that Black women sustain every day in this country. And so I'm like, I want her to be educated, and I want to reduce her any harm that she's doing, you know, like because she is like not, like, she's not an anti-racist person yet, and I want her to be. And by having those conversations, it doesn't happen overnight, but it's possible. Like I just posted, I was like, I had a 2-hour conversation with my mom, and she, like, there were times when she like evaded and like didn't want to like have the conversation, but like just call people back in and say like, hey, I'm like, I want to have this conversation with you, like I want to. And like there are things that she's getting, and it's slow, and it's like it takes time, but it's possible to do this. And I'm like calling people to have these conversations, and like at the same time, like I am watching my friends who are younger than me or like not as politically experienced as me get radicalized by this moment. And it's just as important to have conversations with them and to give them education. And like again, like I'm hosting a watch party for the 13th, like my friends who are saying for the first time, like publicly, Black Lives Matter, who are getting why I say fuck the police, like they're getting it for the first time, you know. And like I'm saying like yes, and here's this thing to read, here's this place to donate, right? Like that's our job as people who as white people who are, you know, further along in like unlearning racism, even though I think that I even still to this day, and white people who are way more experienced than me still have unlearning to do as far as racism goes for the rest of our lives, because we've been taught it for our entire lives, and the whole system is set up. So like I also want to say, like, saying you're an anti-racist doesn't mean you're not still a racist. I will say, like, I've still got internalized racism, and like that's okay to admit, and like that's a good thing to admit, because that means you're still like pushing up against that thing, and like pushing it and hitting it day in and day out. And like that's, I know that was a long but like that's what I want to say is like get educated, have those tough conversations. My last like thing on my notes that I want to make sure I hit is like white people need to have more Black role models. They like having
I want you to understand this is hilarious. It's not hilarious, but the reason I cackled the way I just did is so my father coaches track. He started coaching track my sophomore year of high school when I was on the track team for a brief moment where I pretended to run. And so he then has since coached in 3 different private schools in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. And he makes jokes in the house where he'll be like, I gotta find Black runners to show my team because my team isn't Black. Or like he'll have like, 1 or 2 athletes on the team that are Black, but these schools are predominantly white. And he like makes a point to use Black folk as those examples. So I want you to get into that, but it's just like the way you said it, I just instantly heard one of my dad's like comments about it and it made me cackle. But please get into this because this is the real tea of it all.
So like I mean, to preface this, one of the most important things for me about revolutionary politics in general is that like, and we've touched on it before, not everyone is going to be doing the same things.
Yes.
And like whatever your career is or like whatever you feel like your calling is, whether you're an actor, for me I'm a theater educator, like or like whatever your job is or like your calling, right? Anti-racism is something you can apply and need to apply in your area, right? So like whatever career or area of study you're in, like find the Black voices in that area. So like for me as a theater educator, I mean there are like Black theater educators that I follow and that like I work with, right? But the educator that has influenced how I teach the most is Tarana Burke, who most people know as like the founder of the Me Too movement.
Right.
But for me, the thing, like I love her work on that. Obviously, I love her work on that. But I think the thing that gets lost is how Me Too was created out of her mentoring Black girls and realizing that they cannot be effective agents of social change if they don't have self-esteem and a self-reliance first. Yes. And so like for me as a theater educator, like that work affirmed something in me that I already knew, like as a queer person, like having a queer role model in my like theater education was incredibly valuable for me, and I've always known that. But knowing that like a part of my role as a theater educator for Black students and for Indigenous students and for all my queer students who see me as a role model is to make them feel seen and to use theater education to give them that self-esteem. And so like for me, like the biggest thing that what I've been encouraging people to do on the Blackout Day specifically is like go into your field. I've been like talking to my friends who are designers and saying like find a Black scenic designer and like post their stuff, like post something about them on your timeline today with donation links underneath, right? Like go find those people, like the stories of Black success to uplift those and the stories of struggle and the stories of like historic uprisings within your own like area of life, right? Within your own location, within your career. Because every single industry is whitewashed. We have to go look for that stuff. We cannot allow that to just be like, it's not going to fall into your lap.
It just can't be something that we all sit with and know is a problem and don't do anything about, which is why, at my former program, your current program, so I'll say it quietly to not implicate you so much, but the idea of like, we know there's an issue with representation of Black people, and then we don't do anything to fix it, but we say we're working on it. So like I'm about to really do the tea on it. We did for Colored Girls, but we did it in the Black box, where there's only 50 seats versus a main stage where there's 150 seats a night. And then, we do that, and then it does so well that we have to add another show. So we add another show during Parents Weekend, and we do it again, and it's great. We have 2 talkbacks because, the cast wasn't flying like that. And then the season comes out for the 2020-2021 school year, and then all of the work that we're seeing is white. And so like you're saying, it's important to go into your field and be knowledgeable of the Black people, the Latinx people, the Asian people that are in the field that you are studying in as a white person, and to go seek marginalized voices and to uplift them. So it's like in the theater department, there's really no excuse for it.
Yeah.
We know August Wilson, we know Lorraine Hansberry, we know these people, but it's about like, how are we actively using our knowledge in spaces? I'm
putting this out there publicly, and I haven't discussed this with other reps, but like as the EDI rep, I feel like I have some weight. I am going to make sure that 50% of lab content next year is anti-racist education, because I'm tired. I'm so sad I leave when the interesting things happen. Like the thing is, like, I want us to read a play a week from mostly Black and centering Black, but other marginalized identities as well. But have it be like a book club and an assignment for lab. I think that's honestly, Jim, scrap papers. Like, nobody cares about those papers. We all write those papers 2 days, like 2 seconds before they do. Nobody honestly, you'd be like, papers. You literally, it's like, you're like, oh shoot, it's due at 5. I'm on the toilet right now. I guess I'll write it. I'm adding to my checklist, Marshall training, 13th watch party, and petition that I'll start and I'll put in SU drama for us to read a play a week, write a paragraph, like a literal paragraph, and instead of writing papers. I like it. Because seriously, like, one, we need to be exposed to more work, and two, like, it keeps it on the docket. It's not just a throw out for Black History. And what I want to then mention on top of it is, having now done the Tepper program, I, as a Black student, went in on my first days of Tepper, and when professors asked me the kind of material I wanted to work on, specified that I wanted to work on material specifically by Black women, but by Black playwrights, because I had not done so at SU Drama. And let me tell you what I did all semester long. Worked on Black material. And like Black material appropriately selected and referred, not just like, Raisin in the Sun. Like, literally, like, had my professors do things. I worked on Blood at the Root by Dominique Morisseau with a white student, because guess what? Black playwrights are writing white roles. Shocking. And we did that in my scene study class. And for my monologues, I think we did maybe 9 weeks of monologues just because of the COVID stuff. And I would say 8 of the weeks I did stuff by Black people. Like, I think it's one of those of, it's not, because industries are whitewashed, I'm not going to say that this information and this this history and this work is readily apparent. But what I will say is, it is not that it's nowhere to be found. And so it's incumbent, and the thing about it becomes is, it should not be on me as a Black student to, one, educate others, but to, in an institution, especially specifically talking about institutions of higher learning, where I am paying X thousand, $75K plus a year, I should not have to do but so much outside learning. If I choose to, that's fine, but it shouldn't be that I'm so underrepresented in my own curriculum that I am paying you to teach me that I have to go seek it. It should be, wow, I just read this play by Dominique Morisseau, and I'm really interested in her work, and now I went out and read everything because I was exposed to it here. Not, damn, I don't know no Black playwrights because I ain't seen none and they don't want to talk about them, so Dominique Morisseau and Katori Hall, let me go see what they doing. Like, I think it's about, like you were saying, of, like, today, if you are a white person who is going to participate in this blackout shenaniganry, make sure that you're spending the time to find and seek and amplify content of Black creators in all fields, in all spaces, in all ways, and learning the impact that Black people have had on your field. Like, that's also important. Like, there are a lot of people
who are engineers who don't know the contributions made by Black people in engineering or made by Black people in theater or television or all of these different fields. And it's super important to be aware of that, because I think about this a lot with Syracuse. Syracuse is a program with so many top 20 and top 10 programs. We're graduating people who are going to be the tops of their fields, who are diversity and inclusion and competent.
I'm challenging white people right now to tag their favorite institution, like especially theater people. We're so concerned about image. I'm challenging white people right now. I tagged Syracuse Stage, and I tagged in a post on my story this week about Manhattan Theater Club opening their doors to protesters and allowing them safe haven from police specifically. And I also tagged the largest theater in Washington State, who I know me because I've called them out on stuff before. They follow me, they know me.
Know me now.
I showed up in their office less than 6 months ago. Because I
just had an image of you pulling up with like signs and being like, listen.
No, my favorite thing, they asked me for a meeting, and I said, I showed up, and my favorite thing is not looking the way people think that like I would look. And I showed up and I was like, I'm here. And they said, you look younger than we thought you'd be. And I was like, thank you, I guess. I don't know. Thanks for that. But like tag your institutions and put your reputation on the risk is on the line is what I'm saying. Like we're white, like the fragility here is astronomical. For you to say like, I'm not going to post about it like because it's going to like mess up my feed, or like future employers are going to see it.
Child, my agent out here posting about it. My agents are donating to it. I spoke to my agent yesterday. She was like, I really don't care. She's like, make sure, whatever you're posting and stuff you can live with. And she's like, we're liberal. She's like, the only time I've seen it backfire is when people, were out here being ignorant on the other side of the political sphere. And that's when I've seen it be problematic for them. But she was like, my agents made a statement. They made a statement last week before agents were making statements. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it's like industries, and I say this a lot of like, if you are in a position where you don't feel that you can speak out about things that directly impact your identity, I think you might want to have a conversation with yourself and your God about what that means for you. Because I know for me, like, I am Black. I am radically Black at all times, in all spaces, in all ways. If my Blackness disrupts your comfort, that's on you. So it's like, for me, I'm not posting everything that I see. And of course, I have some more radical thoughts in my head than I'm willing to publicly share. But I'm still posting about what's going on. I'm still posting my critiques about the Blackout Tuesday and my support and where my support lies. I am still using my privilege and space to make sure that I'm calling attention to things that are important to me, because I think a lot of the reasons why there is so much discord and disharmony and mistrust amongst communities, speaking specifically racially, not even into everyone else's identities, is that like we don't have open conversations, and that we don't feel like honesty is what is valued. And in a capitalist society, like your humanity and your honesty and you being a good person like really isn't what matters. But it should be what matters, because the reason think about it, the reason I know that I can have this conversation with you, to invite you on the show to have this conversation, is because prior to this, we have a relationship, because we were able to speak to each other, and we were able to have respectful conversations about experiences, and then work together to figure out solutions. And I think that if we were all able to have, like I have this comfort with you, doesn't mean I have this comfort with every single white person. But I think if we get to the point where we're able to have conversations and say what needs to be said, like I'm okay with calling something racist. I'm okay with calling something sexist. I'm okay with calling something ableist, because if I am able to do that, then maybe I'm making the space better for the next generation of people that come after me. And I think that's always been, specifically having attended private schools, like that's always been important to me. Like if I graduate from this space and it looks the exact same, then there's something wrong. And if I graduate from this space and I've done nothing but survive, that's also wrong. Like it is important to me, and I'm having those conversations with current students at my high school now of like, I didn't do all the work that I should have done when I was in high school. He's on another curfew. For everybody watching from DC, we are having another curfew. That was an emergency alert that came through my phone just now. Just want to point that out. But it's important to me that like to continue to advocate for those girls. I'm like, okay, I didn't do all the work that I could have done then, but as an alumna, how do I then do the work to help that space? Which for me was like, okay, I'll send this strongly worded email about y'all not sending a statement because I've graduated. Y'all
Right.
gave me my diploma. I got my class ring. I'm out. There's nothing y'all can do to me at this point. Versus like
If there are any alumni of my high school joining the live, be prepared that I will be posting something on Facebook today using my white privilege and using the fact that I'm a graduate to say you have posted about your gala 10 times in the last 10 days and you have not posted anything about riots in the streets of your city. And I think that as a Jesuit Catholic institution, that is a shame, and that is something you should be ashamed of, on top of the fact that because you are complicit in white supremacy through the walls of your institution, that you allow students to graduate your institution, your Jesuit Catholic social justice minded institution, indoctrinated into white supremacy. And so like for you to ignore this and to ignore this crisis as you do the lives of your Black students every single day of the school year is to say that the donor money matters more than Black lives.
And that's exactly the conversation we're having in alumni groups and with current students at my high school of like, so my high school, our tagline, without saying the name of the school, is blank girls have something to say, because it was an all-girls school. That used to be a tagline. It actually was erased my sophomore year there, bloop. And I'm like, so how y'all gonna say this? Y'all send every year for our intern, we have an internship program in high school that rivals that of most colleges, if I'm being honest. For your junior year, you get sent off to Capitol Hill for an internship. We had John Lewis come speak for a graduation. We do all this stuff, but I'm seeing no statement. I'm seeing no actual support for Black students because there's no Black faculty at my school teaching. There's one Black faculty in like upper administration, and all the other Black people who work there are like in grounds, in like meals or and things like that. In industries that are important and vital, but are not in academic spaces to advocate for students, is my point. And so like these statements having to be coupled with action items, having to be, and I think the thing about the statements is it's not that the statement does anything by itself other than acknowledges my humanity or acknowledges that I as a student might be going through something. Like
that's another thing.
As a high school student, your whole year was disrupted because of COVID. You don't get prom, you don't get graduation. Then you're a Black, and then there's actual COVID. So beyond the two events you're missing, you have actual COVID running around. And then I'm a Black student who's expected to function, quote unquote, typically in a classroom with everything that's going on that level. And then my actual identity is under attack. Like those are things that to me are just, it's really sad and it's really upsetting. Specifically for me about high school kids, but it's upsetting about everybody in general.
One thing I've been saying to the other reps, I just sent a text message at 3 a.m. last night, was we need to make sure that I mean, the rib has been keeping me up. It is what it is. The thing that we need to keep in mind and we need to make sure that faculty are zeroed in on, we cannot leave a moment of error on this, is that Black students are going to come back different at the end of this summer.
Yes.
Like, and faculty are gonna generalize it and say we're all gonna come back,
but like no,
from isolation. And I'm like, no, call it out. Your Black students are gonna come back, and also I'm gonna say it. Several allies are gonna come back with with a different kind of trauma, because like being a white ally in direct action spaces carries a much lighter form of trauma, but it's also very different.
But it's true, and I don't want to say, and I don't even necessarily want to say lighter as much as different, because I'm like, and you feel free to share or not share whatever you want to share. But it's like we talked about what has happened as a result of your direct action, like physically for you, and so it's like I want to say different because I'm not you, I'm not in your lived experience, so I don't know what that feels like. But I know that for me, as someone who cares about you and reading that, I was like, like
So
it's
like,
I
so
think
like, it's not just like I've been kind of talking about it, but kind of been quiet. But like I got my rib broken by a baton on Saturday. Like that's a thing, but also the fact that like when during the Not Again SU movement in February, right? Like the 4 days locked inside, like that is traumatizing for everyone involved, but for white allies who I know didn't get a lot of sleep that whole month because like we were sleeping in shifts. I still don't sleep more than 3 hours a time. My sleep schedule, I don't have a sleep schedule anymore. Like I don't have a circadian rhythm. And so like those things, like I'm telling white allies again, as I said at the beginning of this conversation, like there are things you're going to lose if you're going to do this.
yeah.
And like get ready, like get prepped, like let's do this. Let's revolution time. Like I think like there are things it's gonna suck sometimes, but like for me, the liberation of the people I'm around is more important than my comfort in any like space. And so like I'm not gonna act like, I think a lot of people miss the fact that like, I mean, there was an SU drama alum yesterday who was attacked, beaten, and arrested in New York City.
Yeah.
A white person.
Yeah.
Who was, and they still said, I don't regret it. And me getting detained and me getting beaten, I know it allowed people of color to get away. And I know it allowed Black people to get away. And so like that's allyship. Did I text all the other stage managers less than 2 hours ago and say, so 2 of us have gotten attacked by police this week. Who's next? I'm ready. White SM, step up. Because, you know, those, I mean, I'm going to say those skills in your, like, I mean, a lot of our conversations like theater centric because we're theater people, but like the skills that you have from doing this work, the empathy and the, and for stage managers, like the level-headedness and like the planning and all that is like the revolutionary tools, you know, and you can use those and it's okay to use those. Keeping your calm and like when you're staring down riot gear is tough. It's not easy, but like, you know, it's also okay. Like I'm telling white people, like, I get that you're exhausted and it's okay to be like, I'm gonna take an hour. Like it's okay to do that, but like don't look away. Like get back to it. Like don't let it slip. And even after these protests are over, and I hate saying that because it's white privilege to say I want this to get back to normal and no one should be saying that. Like, but when this is over, because it's not going to be over.
Right.
Like I'm expecting those people to continue that revolutionary energy.
Yes.
Even when we're not in the streets.
And I kind of going on that, I think that was you kind of gave us a nice place to sort of like begin to wrap up. However long that takes us, but like to begin to wrap up, because I also, do you know what time it is?
1:46.
1:46, so it's 5:46?
4:46.
4:46. 4:46. Okay, cool. So that means we have about 15 or so minutes before this will also go out. So that's perfect. I want to kind of recap some of the things that we talked about as far as action. So we talked about direct action. We talked about direct. Isaiah, you know I cannot do math. Don't play me. I'm an acting major. Okay.
Love you. And
listen, my highest grade
like
in
as we wrap up the points, like I'm gonna be like, okay, so, and I want people after this conversation to not bother you and to not bother other Black people in their life unless they're Venmoing you. Here's like, I want them
my
to come
Cash
to
App
me.
is one Y less than my Instagram name, if anyone wants to.
Here's what I'll say. I want you to come to me. So as we go through the things that we've talked about in the last 2 hours, I do want to say, like, come to me and say, hey, I want more info on this, and I will send you resources.
Isaiah has put his Cash App in the comments.
Isaiah, you're like,
person,
you are,
y'all.
Isaiah, you
it's
are
my
next on my
birthday
list
month, so if you Cash App a Black person, please Cash App them at least $22 since I'm 22.
Isaiah is next on my list for direct mutual funds. But so as far as direct action goes, white people, if you want martial training, I am going to put that in the SU Drama, the SU Drama Facebook page for those of you who are watching from that sector. And I'm also going to just put it on, I'm going to send it to a lot of people. I really, really want people to have that because I think it's vital. And I think it also helps to quell some of that necessary anxiety.
Yes.
Because it is a scary situation. I don't want anyone to be like, it's not scary for white allies, because it's scary because it is scary. But like that fear, you need to educate yourself out of that fear instead of running.
Yes.
You need to get prepared. You need to know how to deal with tear gas and how to deal with, how to deal with mace. Like those things are the things that will keep you, keep you as safe as possible and keep those around you safe and make you an effective person. And being more effective will make you less scared.
Yeah.
We talked about Blackout Day.
Yes. Blackout Day, part 1 has the full in-depth conversation, but Blackout Day really, as a Black person, I'm not feeling it. I've had conversations with other Black people who really are not feeling it. Eli and I have had the conversation. It is, at best, is what I will call performative allyship. Because people at first were clogging the Black Lives Matter hashtag, which has vital and important information, with these blacked out tiles of nothingness. I think as a Black person, I feel like right now, the most harmful thing we could be doing is silencing ourselves and silencing helpful and useful information. And so I just don't think that for allies or for people directly targeted in these, hate crimes that we're seeing, I don't think it's a useful or effective tool of protest. I think other more useful forms of digital protest, adding donation links or donation buttons to your posts, adding links of resources for anti-racist education. I think those are better things if you're going to stick to, the digital sphere. Other things that are helpful in the digital sphere. See, this is what happens when you don't warm up and you can't talk. In the digital sphere are like telling people why they shouldn't be posting pictures with protesters' names or faces or identifiable things. I think that's an important use of your digital protest space.
Yeah, doing the emotional labor. I don't know if I mentioned it a couple times in passing, but like being sure to do that emotional labor that Black people do not have the time or energy for right now.
Yes,
so like that calling people out, the way that I spent my morning calling people out on the blackout tiles thing, but like in days previous, like calling people out for posting photos of protesters' faces, of identifiable marks, because it's not just faces, it's also like tattoos and like identifiable clothing and like even body shapes. Like facial recognition is not as common as body shape heat sensing recognition,
which I did not know.
Like people really don't hit that. Is like people are not getting identified by like their noses and their mouths, right? Another weird quirk about this protest being during COVID is that the police have no recourse in telling us to take off our masks. So like all of us are censoring our faces in that way, but that leaves us more open to, if you've got a tattoo or if you've got like a like identifiable walk, even like,
or if you're wearing like clothes that like are like like I know for a lot of people, like my dad is in a Greek fraternity, and so like if he was wearing like his his letters, like those are easy ways to begin to identify people outside of their faces. But I think like we're getting into that idea of like doing the emotional labor that Black people and allies who are on the front lines are doing, that they're not going to have. Like, as much as I say white people go have conversations amongst white people, like if you're out here, getting beat by batons and whatnot, I don't expect you to then pick up the phone when you get home and have a 2-hour conversation with your racist Uncle Bob. Like, I don't expect that from you. But there are other.
But if you're injured in bed like me, I've got time.
Right.
I'm like, I'm sitting there. I've got time.
Like as they also said, unnatural hair colors, piercings, tattoos. That is true, because me and this bright red hair would be real.
I've seen this video of this car burning, and the video, I think I'm not sure who shared it. Like I'm not sure if it's a white person, but like the two people who are standing, even their backs, one guy has very recognizable tattoos down his arms, and the other girl's wearing like a long blue wig, or she has like long blue hair, right? Like,
Yeah.
so like those things are identifiable, even if you're
Yeah.
not showing faces, right? So that
emotional labor of like doing those things, I think that's going to be more effective than this. So I think that is really important. What was the next thing on the list? I want to make sure I try to get through everything before we lose our time spot.
About like intersectional oppression, and like you can connect with the things that make you that connect, and use those as a way in, not centering your experience, especially when it comes to police brutality. Like right now we're centering Black like victims of police brutality, and like yes, there are like Indigenous and Latinx and other victims of like police brutality and police misconduct, but like, and we need to be talking about those, especially as we're like moving to broader conversations about police abolition, but like those things are not central to the Black Lives Matter movement, and like posting about them separately is like is important to do.
Yes.
But using your experience, I mean, what we talked about is like using your experience as a way in, and as a way to say like I don't understand. I will never understand. Like I will never fully understand what that's like to experience. But like I have a similar relationship to this institution of power, and I'm going to use that little bit of pain that I have to like fight harder, even harder for you.
Yeah. We talked about like donating, and we talked about donating in two fronts. We talked about it for everyone who will get the reference. Don't be a Virgil, be a Drake. Don't be a rich person and donate $50. Be a rich person and says, hold my Prosecco as you donate 100,000. But also making sure that we are donating in ways, in all of the ways that are useful. So that's bail funds, that is community programs, that is after school programs, that are things that directly center the experiences of Black people, and making sure that we're donating mutual aid funds as well, like giving support to Black people in all aspects of their lives, not just as victims of police brutality. And then we talked about SU drama. We did some shading. Not some shading, but like some shading. We talked about SU. Well, specifically where it came from was Eli's point of for white people, it is important to find Black role models and find people within your industry that are Black. Find Black people within your industry that have done work that has allowed you to be where you are, but also as a way to acknowledge the contributions of Black Americans and Black people to your line of work. And also the importance of, like, as educators, of making sure that you are exposing everybody to the works of Black and other marginalized voices as a way to create a more diverse and inclusive curriculum. Yeah,
I am saying it again as your EDI rep, and I'm going to fight for this. I'm really not going to ask the other reps for permission. Sorry. I'm going to start drafting a petition to have us not write lab papers anymore, and for us to instead read plays by Black and include other marginalized voices weekly, and write paragraph reflections on those, because I think that one paper about general diversity is not as effective as anti-racist curriculum being part of weekly discussion.
Yeah.
So
as we wrap up, I wanted to ask you, is there any, I know you shouted out to Ronna Burke, but I wanted to know if there was any book, show, thing that you wanted to shout out that you think
is a important
resource.
My brain is gonna like go blank when I do this.
No, you're fine.
White Supremacy and Me is a book. I'm like, authors' names always go over my like the author's names never stick in my brain, but
No, you're fine.
White Supremacy and Me, The Hate You Give, The 13th is a Netflix. It's on Netflix.
Yeah.
I have other resources. I can compile them and I can give them to people if they message me. And also, like, I also, as someone who's like has a learning disability that affects reading, I highly recommend articles because they're a little easier to get into. Like, if you don't have, like, because my brain processing a book sometimes is not an option, but like I've been sending people articles about like in defense of looting and like why like looting is not the thing we should be focusing on right now, and like actually where that anger comes from. And like, so like those shorter articles are also another way in to get you to, if you cannot read, and like if like reading an entire book is hard for you, like mentally or like from any kind of accessibility standpoint,
Yes.
financial or otherwise, here's resources. You can still get anti-racist education without having to. I would encourage you to invest in audiobooks or other versions of the books.
Audiobooks, or I want to shout out actually, because when I was getting ready, I'm a Tidal user. Listen, if I'm gonna support capitalism, I'm gonna at least support Black capitalism. Although Jay-Z, but Tidal does this thing. They do it a lot. They do it throughout the year, probably because it is a Black-owned platform. But they make different playlists of different. I would almost call them anti-racist education tools, in the sense of like, it'll be like they just did one about speeches. They usually do it like, there's a Martin Luther King speech playlist. There's a Malcolm X speech playlist. They have a general one now. They just did. They have a couple different playlists about protests and different things like that. But I love. I'm into the arts one, so like music, television shows, things like that. We are at about 1 minute and 54 seconds left. But I want to thank you for being willing to have this conversation with me and being willing to have this conversation with me in public for the benefit of other people. I appreciate you and all of the work that you do in all of the places and spaces that you exist and show up for me and for people that look like me. I want you to be safe, because I know that you want to go back out there and run around and do things. And I'm like, above all, I want you to be safe, and I want you to continue to. I want you to prioritize your health as much as you are prioritizing the safety of other people. And I know that's easier said than done.
I want to shout out like every single Black activist on the street. I'm reminding you because you already know this, and I'm telling you, rest is anti-capitalist.
It is.
They don't want you to rest. The same way that education is. Rest is anti-capitalist, and I'm talking to a couple of you, and I've said this to you in person during Not Against You. Go home and get some sleep. Go home and rest.
Yes.
Like, it is important, and they don't want you to do it, so you need to do it. It's counterculture, baby. Like, it's punk to sleep.
Yes.
So,
but I just want to thank you. I appreciate this conversation. I appreciate you. When it's down to ride at SU Drama Time, I'm always ready for the shenanigans. So, if you ever need anything, please let me know. But everybody, this has been your new favorite talk show, episode 2, the live version, Beyond the Facebook Status, What is Allyship? Thank you so much to Eli Blodgett. Thank you so much for being here.
Audio is very...
Smitty speaking.